Welcome to the Subconscious Elements podcast. It is your boy Scotty P, and I'm here with my co-host Tori Setliff, and we're getting into the gene keys. This is the fourth episode, and we're going over the fourth gene key. Again, we're doing this because we're going through our own spiritual journey and going through this book and trying to put it into words and conceptualize the things that it talks about. Definitely helps us in our day lives and in our relationship, and we feel like putting it together and collabing on this and putting it out there only helps us, and we hope that helps you too. But I'll go ahead and let you introduce the gene key.
All right, so we are on the fourth gene key, and at the shadow level you will see it is intolerance. And towards transmuting this shadow of intolerance, you can see the gift of understanding, and through the gift of understanding, finally you can reach the level of forgiveness, and this is like the Christ mind like state. And the fourth gene key, it is the ring of union. So it basically at the Siddhic state will forgive everything until it becomes annihilation of form itself. And at our current level, we can see forgiveness at only a shadow of the beyondness. That the highest level that we can imagine is only a mere shadow of what is truly forgiveness at its purest form. So the fourth hexagram of the I Ching, it's called the youthful folly. And this in and of itself kind of defines the state of humanity that we're in currently, by saying that we're youthful in terms of evolution, and our mindset can sometimes be
A lack of what?
It's like a youthful and...
Oh, youthful folly is essentially like a lack of good sense.
Yeah, just going through life and not knowing any better, basically.
Right.
So just unaware of its own faults. And so through this shadow, you can see the mind's habit of becoming entangled with the emotional states and kind of becoming consumed by those and reacting solely from that emotional state, emotional body. And intolerance is best understood through the shadow of reaction. So yeah, it takes the emotion and then reacts solely from that, instead of kind of objectifying the situation and seeing it through like a third person perspective.
Yeah, so the youthful folly describes the fourth gene key. And I guess like in order to describe the youthful folly is essentially like when you meet young people, a lot of times they don't have the experience to understand what you're saying or to make good judgments. So their lack of good sense comes from a lack of experience, and only through like you can be intelligent but not have wisdom, right? So wisdom is the application of intelligence and experience, and that's how you become wise. That's why usually like wise people are generally older, because they've seen and been through these things and not just thought about them. And that's what can happen when you don't one, you can't just think through things, right? You have to have been through them so that you understand that there is some type of gap in your thinking, right? Unless you experience it, you think that your head is what you imagine to be correct. So it kind of explains it further on in the book as we get through this, but it's pretty much saying that only through experience can you realize that you don't know it all. And that in of itself comes with a wisdom. Understanding that you don't know it all, or understanding that you know nothing at all, then can you actually be open to life and what reality is and the mystery of existence. But we all know the young kid that thinks it all.
He thinks he knows everything.
That thinks they know everything, right? We've all been that young 18, 19-year-old, that young 23, 24, 25-year-old, and just thinking that we got the world in our grasp and that we understand it, we've been through it. But only do you realize that as you get into your 30s, and one day for us our 40s, do you start to realize that we only have one perspective of the truth.
Yeah, I was saying that this state is very chaotic and unstable, and basically We just recently watched a video that was depicting the two voices in your head as one is extremely loud and it's motivating you and it's telling you everything you're thinking is correct. It's like, yeah, keep going. And then the second voice is a quiet, less pronounced voice, and it's kind of guiding you, but you're turning that voice down because the other voice is louder and it's saying, no, maybe you shouldn't do this. Maybe this is self-destructive. Have you thought about this like deeply? And then the other voice is saying, no, you're perfect. Keep going. Like, this is the path. And so only through following the louder voice do we come to realize that the clear, subtle guidance within us is a better form of guidance in general.
Right. Yeah, you're talking about how this mind state is chaotic. It's essentially referring to that us as humans are led by our emotions, and that is a chaotic state, because then not only are we fully present with our emotions and understand them, but we're also then affected by other people's emotions. And then we become in this reactive state where we're reacting to our emotions, we're reacting to other people's emotions, and essentially we're just in this constant reactive state. And I think that we've all been in a situation where someone says something to you and then you're just, boom, say something right back without really thinking about it. Or someone says something to you and then you do something immediately right back, right, without actually thinking about it. I remember this one time I was having a conversation with someone. I was actually overhearing a conversation between two ladies, and they were like going on about how someone had insulted them or pretty much insulted them, and they were just so upset about it. And I was like, I just casually like popped my head in the conversation, and I was like, well, you don't have to take it personal. Just realize that what she said to you has more to do with her than you. And then the other girl was like, how can she not take it personal? And then they both just kind of shut me out of the conversation, and it cracked me up. But yeah, a lot of times, right, it's like when someone says something to you, that says more about them than it does to you. And that's how you're supposed to deal with that. It's like, don't even let it stick to you. But just in the society that we're in and the way that the mind works, it's like someone says something to you and then you just circle around it, right? It's just like that becomes the thing. And then you become reactive. Now you're upset. Now you let it ruin your day, your week, your month, whatever. When if we just, let it pass through us, we can just take back our freedom. Instead of just reacting, we can choose a better outcome or choose to not let it affect us. But that comes with, like, again, understanding our emotions, sitting with them, and not just immediately reacting to how we feel in the moment.
Yeah, it was saying that basically we only see our side of the argument as opposed to seeing both sides and seeing that there is a third perspective also. It's that you think that your perspective is correct and they think that their perspective is correct, and then you fail to come on to terms together. And so it basically says that you see what you want to see, and these patterns become diluted and further intricate, and you just keep validating your perspective as opposed to attempting to hear the other side, analyze it, truly like understand where they're coming from, and kind of take yourself out of your own emotional and reactive state.
Right. One of the things that says, that kind of ties up what we're saying, is like the mind has a habit of becoming entangled with our emotions. So then it uses logic to justify our emotions instead of doing what you're saying, which is understanding that's just one side and that there's multiple sides. And that also goes for logic itself. It's not just the emotional side, right? Logic, one of the main themes of this gene key is that logic in itself is illogical, because you can use logic to disprove logic. And I think what it's getting at by saying that is there really are no facts in life. There are generalizations that we come to agreement on so that we can have a standard that we all look to, but it doesn't mean it's a fact. And you might say, well, what the heck are you talking about, Scott? One easy way to demonstrate this is the boiling point of water. It is 212 degrees to boil water at sea level. So if you're in a different location, if you're below sea level or above sea level, and we all live at different heights. Whether you live in Colorado, you're going to be at a different one. If you live in Montana, you're going to be at a different elevation. Mexico City is below sea level. So, and depending on where you're at elevation will change the degree at which water boils. I think even like the kind of water will slightly adjust, right? Like how much water, what pot are you using? What type of heat source are you using? All these things will change the boiling point of the water. So it's like, then it's not a fact. It's not a fact that water boils at 212 degrees. There's a bunch of factors that determine what the exact boiling point is. And then that would only be true for that point in time, right? Like as time goes, the earth moving in a different space could affect, the exact boiling temperature. And again, this applies to a bunch of different facts. If you can understand that something that we believe to be 100% true is not 100% true, you can also apply that to the way that we perceive, our relationships, interactions, situations, that no matter how strongly you feel about something, there's a good chance that it's only true for your perspective. And someone else's perspective is going to have a completely other truth that is still true, right? We can't tell people that live in the hills of Virginia or in the mountains of Colorado or the Smoky Mountains that their boiling point ain't the right boiling point, right? It's like, from their perspective, 200 degrees is the boiling point, right? So I think coming to that understanding is one of the parts of understanding, right? It's how you come to understanding that you only have one fraction of the truth and that there can be multiple truths or a spectrum of truths.
Is that the theory of relativity? Is that what you're describing? So I've heard that term kind of like tossed around a couple times.
No, the theory of relativity, I kind of see what you're saying, but the theory of relativity is actually speaking about how time and space relate to each individual. So things experience time based on the speed that they're moving. So, I really can't explain to you exactly what theory of relativity means, but they generally refer to as a way to explain the dimension of space and time. So again, it's a theory. It's not actually fact, right? We currently do not know what the fourth dimension is. We believe it could be time, but there's multiple ways to think about it. And they don't know exactly what it is yet. So the theory of relativity is Einstein's way of describing how gravity, time, space all come together as a dimension, but to describe our world. But there's no way of actually proving it. And from what I understand, it doesn't tie into how quantum mechanics work. So because the way that the quantum world works doesn't really match with Einstein's theory, it doesn't really link up. But for a long time, though, the theory of relativity was like, oh, he explained, this is it. But just with new discoveries, they realized that there is still something else missing.
Yeah, I want to segue back to that once we get to the acidic level, but I want to keep more of a linear structure with this.
The city I thought was rebirth.
Well, it is forgiveness, which ties into rebirth. But I want to go through the gift first before we get there.
Go ahead.
All right. So basically, it's just saying that we believe that we can achieve everlasting peace, but that our mind can never come to such resolution, but it strives to get there. And in this state of striving to achieve this peaceful state, our minds can become repressive, and through this repressive state we become apathetic, to where our mind basically becomes so exhausted with needing and wanting to find the answers to what is the truth. And I remember experiencing this whenever I took mushrooms for the first time. I basically, in my own mind, was asking the universe questions about things that I learned in school, whether it was what I learned in science class, where it was talking about precipitation, or when I was in mathematics and learning about other math. So I was asking it questions, and basically what came to me was, the only thing you know is that you know nothing. And that just kept ringing through my mind. And that in and of itself answered all the questions that I had, in a sense that I was no longer asking these questions. So that for me helped me, because you understand that there is no answer. And whatever you learn, that can be an answer, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the only answer. It's just a answer that we can come to put our minds at ease or in a more restful state. So in this repressive nature with the apathy, it's basically when your mind just gives up and it becomes like frozen in a mental state and mental patterns, to where you can start to believe that you are less smart than everyone else. I don't really know what to say for that word, but less intelligent. There it is. Less intelligent than other people, and you just become accepting in the state that you're at, rather than learning to ask questions again and to strive for.
Yeah. So it's saying like, that the only true knowing that you have is that you understand nothing. And chasing knowledge is a chase that leads to nothing, right? There's a great story in the DC universe of Brainiac. It's like one of the side stories that they use. There's a movie about it, an animated movie. But one of the main antagonists of Superman, Brainiac, is like crossing the universe and attacking different civilizations, and then making them miniature, and then shrinking them, and then keeping them as trophies. And he downloads all their information, and he's his whole thing is to go across the universe and download all the information from all the civilizations, and then shrink them and keep them in order to obtain true knowledge, or all knowledge, or the knowledge. And it becomes like an everlasting task that it's doing. And one of the main points of the end that it tries to tell you about is that he doesn't really understand the knowledge that he has. Just because you have this knowledge doesn't mean that you understand it, or that you know these races, or that you understand what so he miniaturized Krypton, right? So he has all these Kryptonians, and that's why Superman's he was trying to download Earth, and then Kal-El, Superman, figures out that he has Krypton with him as well. And eventually the Kryptonians are able to fight back, and they're able to release all the civilizations. But again, one of the main things that becomes apparent is that just downloading this information, or just having these facts, this long list of all this so-called knowledge, doesn't actually help you or do anything for you. Only the lived experience can actually have any actual weight to it. But it was just an interesting thing to think about. Go ahead.
It only applies to the specific environment and lives that they're living. Like the way that one civilization is living is only true for them, as opposed to a completely different atmosphere, environment, it doesn't apply to. So you can only take the truth from that and live it within that experience, rather than hold it as a truth for everything.
Right. What else you got?
And then it says the reactive nature of nitpicking. So basically just when you start to allow thinking to rule your life, you become over obsessive about the small details, and this can control your mindset and, like I said, cause disease, and it can even cause health problems and lack of motivation and all these negative side effects.
Right.
Yeah,
I think the mind has a tendency to just say things, or just make observations. That's what it's for. It's to make observations. And so people get caught up in this idea that they are their brain. They think that the voices in their head is who they are. So then you notice that whatever comes into someone's brain, they'll just say it. And like, that's how nitpicking happens, right? It's like, now this person is always saying what's on their mind. And then like one moment they're just like looking around and they're just like, oh, what about this? Oh, what about that? Oh, what about this? And it's like, dude, chill, relax. So yeah, like that idea of nitpicking, I think it is like strongly related to our confusion that we are the mind. You know, it's like your brain just does that. That doesn't mean it's correct or right, or that you should pay attention to it. And through disassociating yourself with that voice, does it learn to become quiet.
And then you can allow the quiet guidance to kind of take the front seat as opposed to the back seat.
Right. And
so then we move towards the gift of understanding. And this only comes once you understand that you know nothing, basically. And it says that knowledge can never bring a sense of peacefulness. I thought that was pretty interesting. And it says that the paradox is given to the mind to solve, and at the precise moment when the mind has finally realized that its own logic can never solve the koan, understanding dawns. And this is the quantum leap into true understanding. So this kind of like projects you into a different realm of understanding rather than being in the reactive and repressive states.
Right. So a koan is essentially like a meditative sentence. It's like a riddle that a master or a guru would give an initiate, and the initiate is supposed to figure it out. And I can't remember any specific ones off the top of my head because they're very like crazy, but it's essentially this riddle that can't be figured out. And they give them to the initiates, and the initiates try their best to figure it out. But the point is that they can't figure it out. And so that's what they're supposed to come to, is that no answer will be correct. And they use it to let the initiate know that whatever they think they know is wrong. And that it should be, the point is to be in the moment and to not try to use the brain to dissect what's in front of them with logic, but to just be present. And there's this one famous story of a yogi who, I guess yogi might not be the best word, I think monk. The head monk died, so the guru, or the one that was in charge, like passed away, and they're looking to name his successor, the new person who's supposed to be in charge. And they go to put this one guy in charge, and they gave him, I guess, like 24 hours to like come up with like an enlightened saying, or to reach enlightenment, or to like take over. And he spends like all of his time trying to figure out like enlightenment or whatever, so that he can take the mantle. And he only was able to become enlightened after he gave up trying to be enlightened. So he was like the most disciplined, knew everything, knew all the passages he's supposed to know, mastered all the books he was supposed to master. He was the most disciplined of them all, but he still hadn't reached that enlightenment moment. And as he's like panicking, trying to come up with, this moment that he's now going to have to describe because he's going to be the next enlightened one, he essentially just like gives up. He's like, well, I can't do it. I'm not enlightened. And in that moment, he becomes enlightened. And it's an anecdotal story to try and teach you that, you can't, it's not the mind that brings you there. It just happens. Which is interesting. It's kind of frustrating to hear about. You're like, man, after he gives up, he gets it. But that's so true, in a sense that the mind is only one aspect of the way that we understand things.
Yeah, I was saying that it's a very volatile state. Like you said, it just after many frustrations, you basically implode into a state of understanding, and it finally dawns on you. And it's not something that you can bring about with the mind or force. It just naturally dawns upon you.
Right. And it goes on to say that, so life is a mystery, right? And the understanding only happens once you realize that your mind can't understand it with this way of logic. Like, there's just no possible way. And that's how understanding comes. which kind of loops back into that beginner's mind, right? In the beginner's mind, there are many answers. In the expert's mind, there's only few. It talks about how life is a mystery, right? So it's not a problem to be solved. It goes back to that classic quote of life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be experienced. Classic, one of my favorite sayings. And then one of the huge lines that stuck out to me in this chapter was logic cannot solve anything of true importance. And it's like that's like hard to think about, right? Because we've all used our minds to solve these crazy problems, but it's like, if you really just sit with that for a moment, logic cannot solve anything of true importance is like, that's just like, wow, and I think that as you go through life, you realize that, you can't use your mind to solve relationship problems. You can't use your mind to solve happiness. You can't use your mind to solve love. Like, it's just a constant, just a lot of times you got to tell your brain to shut up and just move and feel and, experience and witness, which is trippy.
Yeah, once you can understand this, it allows your whole being to lighten, that you're no longer putting this pressure on yourself, and it allows your mind the space to communicate and play. And this in and of itself is like a breath of fresh air. Like, you realize, okay, I don't have to be so hard on myself. I don't have to put this on myself. Like, whatever is happening is perfect in its own sense, and my mind and my thoughts will not necessarily change the tides in the way that I think it will. And I thought was really interesting was that it was saying that there will be a genetic shift, which is going to be triggered with the amino acid valine and its 49th and 55th gene key. It was basically saying that the new generations of children, they will no longer hold the shadow frequencies within them, and that they'll just naturally be in a state of understanding from birth, which I thought was amazing. That we'll no longer have to undergo this level of suffering in the shadow state, that basically we will be able to be of service of the world from the beginning. And through this, as you were saying, with the revolution, and it'll shortly change society and hopefully further along change the world.
Right. What else you got?
So forgiveness and social revolution will be the end of search for knowledge. No need to logically make sense of the paradoxes of existence, because our new awareness will give us a physical and energetic understanding of existence. So we'll no longer need to logically understand it. We will just naturally understand the rhythms and patterns within our own being. Basically saying that logic will alter, and that we will no longer hold these fears and prejudice within us.
Yeah, that whole idea of our kids are going to be, at a higher state than us. It makes a lot of sense. It's, if you compare it to, if you had a kid and they are like naturally gifted at something that you used to do when you were a kid or adult. Like, you'll find that basketball players who have kids, their kid is able to go way further along in their basketball career than their parents did. And that they have like these natural tendencies that were somehow transferred, right? Like, there is no basketball gene, but there has definitely been a correlation between kids and their parents of like skills that couldn't have possibly be translated through the genetics. That we have like some way of passing on skills, abilities, traits, characteristics to our children that is outside of what we perceive as outside of what we perceive to be the main thing that affects our children, which is genes. So I talk about all the time that, because this reminds me of like a kid that's learning jiu-jitsu and how they're capable of executing moves. Like, I have to learn things a certain way, and I have to do them a certain way because of my own injuries and the way that my body moves, and my body doesn't move that great because of all the injuries and, taking so long to learn how to move, right? But if you can ingrain that into a kid when they're young, their movement is almost like is at such a greater aspect that they're able to learn and create new techniques and understand it at a much higher level than what you were at. And so that's like the same thing, right? It's like as we work ourselves through this gene key and in these different states, that when we have kids, it'll be like, because we've worked through them, they will naturally embody the same or higher levels, frequencies,
They'll have more,
vibrations.
they'll start at a higher level so they can even go higher than that. So an advantage in that sense.
I'm about to have a Buddha baby.
The more work we do, the better off they'll be. So
You got a lot of work, Timmy.
you got to stay out of that apathetic mind. But yeah, basically, so it was saying, when what you were saying, we were just watching Dune last night, and whenever he gets to the planet of Arrakis, and they put on the suits to preserve their moisture for their bodies, the two adults, I believe it was his father and his uncle, they were putting on the suits, and one of the tribes people had to help them with every minute detail. Like, this is why we do this. And then she moves through those two and gets to the son of the father, and he just already had a suit on perfectly. And she's like, so you're familiar with these suits? And he said no, that he has never seen these suits before. And she's like, well, you put the shoes on perfectly, and I've never seen anyone without experience be able to wear this perfectly the first time. And so she just kind of whispers, like, I recognize you, in a sense that she knows that he is the one in the story. But basically, he just already knew how to adapt to the suit without needing any help. So that was pretty interesting.
Right.
And in that same movie, to segue back to the time and space thing, they were just saying that basically the spice that they were getting from that planet, that they were using it to transcend time and space itself. And that at the acidic state in this gene key, time and space dissolves into the beyondness and form itself no longer exists. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that in the movie they're trying to transcend time and space, and then in this gene key it's speaking of the same truth.
Yeah, it was, pretty sure it was saying that the pilots used the DMT to navigate time and space. So they apparently get high with it, and they can somehow see these teleportation points or these transports in between these planets and portals. And one of the things it said about forgiveness was that forgiveness can travel back through time. Right? And trying to conceptualize that and figure out what exactly is it talking about, the closest thing that I can relate it to is when you forgive someone for something they did to you in the past, and how that can change the past itself almost. Like you see it in a whole new light. And again, that's a hard thing to imagine, but if you really think about it, that if you can look back on the terrible things that happened to you and you look at them through the lens of forgiveness, it completely changes the story that you have. It might even change what actually happened. Again, all we have is a memory, and we all know how memories are, right? They're not exactly 100% the truth. And if you're if you're looking at me like, what is he talking about? Memory isn't 100% the truth. Go talk to multiple people with the same memory, and you'll find out that they're all different. And so, again, if you can understand that what happened to you in the past almost had to happen for the things that you want now, right? And understand that everything that's happened to you has just been a part of your story, and that you can change your story. And by changing your story, you change the way that you currently look at things and the way that you'll look at things in the future. You can see that forgiveness, actually does can change the past and can change the timeline that you're on.
It even changes the chemical state of your body, your brain. Changes you from being in the victim mindset towards this happened for me, not against me.
Right, and that's something that Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about. That's something that the author of A New World, he also wrote The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. He also talks about that. So this isn't just like crazy stuff out of this book. This is something that a lot of the gurus or forethinkers at this front also say. Like this, forgiveness changes the past, present, and future.
Yeah, the same thing, like currently we're thinking of Christ. Basically, he had a level of understanding and forgiveness beyond what was comprehensible at that time. And it continues in this day and age to affect people in the way that they think. So that's something that happened in the past, but it's currently still affecting down. And I was saying, once you take the leap from understanding into forgiveness, that basically it descends down on the world, and that the forgiveness itself can release karmic blocks from not only this lifetime, but from centuries. So it can unleash things that have been locked for millions and millions of years that we weren't even aware that existed. And so it's basically saying that karmic debt has stagnated, for generations. Once the debts are released, those in whom they live can understand more incredible transmutations. It's basically just the mysteries of karmic debts, and that we've acquired them personally in our own lives. And this reminds me of the Midnight Gospels. Basically, whenever that one episode with the being, that once he lives his life and he makes more mistakes, he goes back to the hands of where they weigh his goods and bads. And basically they put him back into the same reality, experiencing the same thing, until he can release some of the debt that he has incurred over lifetimes. And I thought it was pretty interesting, because through that, in the beginning, when he's going through these cycles of death and rebirth, he's not understanding what's happening, but through so many processes, he becomes aware, and he becomes like frustrated with himself. And through this frustration, he can understand, like, oh, I need to make a change, or this is going to keep happening. Like, what can I do to clear this? And what can I do to become a better version of myself, so this doesn't continue to happen? It's like, oh yeah, this is not good. I want to make it good. What can I do? So yeah, the episode of Midnight Gospel, highly recommend. Yeah, I was saying that once we're able to kind of get our own karmic debts relieved, that we can then further the debts through nations, like forgiving debts and things of that matter, like financial. But it starts on the individual level, and through individual transmutations we can work on nations and further society, all these things.
Yeah, one of the things you had reminded me of earlier was the Christ consciousness. I got a book called Be Present Now, or Be Here Now. And it's a book written by Ram Dass. And one of the things he talks about, it's like he's got this huge piece about a poem of Christ. And one of the things is that Christ was crying on the cross as they were crucifying him, and people thought he was crying because of the sadness and pain, but he said that he was crying from happiness because he realized that this moment would free so many humans of humanity. And it's like, again, to even try to understand that level of awareness, that level of consciousness, that you could literally be on a cross with nails in your arms, wearing a crown of thorns, in the most agonizing pain that we could think of, right? That actually he was still in this bliss state because he realized that what he is experiencing is for all of humanity, which is pretty trippy. Again, it goes to that whole forgiveness thing, right? Like he wasn't even mad at the people doing him wrong, because he realized that because that they're doing this, and because he's taken this stance, that it's going to put all of humanity on a better
trajectory.
Right. But that's pretty much all I got. What else you got in there?
Yeah, I just want to read this one sentence. It says, pure forgiveness is a universal panacea that radiates in every direction throughout time and space. It is the final answer to end all questions, and when the first atoms of forgiveness finally travel back to the very beginning of time, as they already have, the world we know will begin to dissolve. When all is forgiven, then forgiveness itself no longer exists, only truth. And it's basically saying the final destiny of the fourth city is to rupture the connection between the past and the future, between the black and the white, between the yin and the yang, to finally bring an end to the logical fabric of space-time itself. True forgiveness is merciless because it returns everything to its source and is a force of pure annihilation. The ultimate goal of forgiveness is the fact to bring an end to the world of form itself.
Well, I think on that note we can wrap up.
Yep.
Any closing comments?
Think before you speak.
Yep, forgiveness. Again, one of the things it was saying is that we can't even imagine what true forgiveness is, right? The mind cannot perceive a real truth. Joe Rogan was talking about this recently. He was saying that humans wouldn't even know what to do with truth if we had it. That would be like giving a smartphone to a caveman. And that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Even in the Gene Key is talking about it, that we can't perceive truth, that we only get one small aspect of it, and that our minds can't even wrap around a real truth, right? So it's saying that forgiveness is the truth, and we can only even perceive a shadow of it, right? And then, yeah, that same idea of, I like to think the truth is like a secret of the universe. And it came to me one day that the reason we don't get secrets of the universe is because we can't do anything with them anyway. It's kind of like cliches, whereas, people want answers to things and then they give a cliche and they're just like, that's not what I was looking for. And then don't listen to it. But just because it's not like some fancy thing or some fancy answer that you imagined it to be, so people won't use it, right? Same thing with the truth of the real truth. It's just like you see it and you're just kind of like shrug your shoulders at it and you won't even use it. And I saw that with one time I had a DMT trip and Shiva came to me and he said the only thing that matters in this life is being present. And even as I tried to think of things to say, or as I was trying to describe what was happening, he just looked at me and said, "See, you're not present." And as I was trying to formulate thoughts and words, it just kept pulling me away from the experience. And he was like, "I told you, the only thing that matters is being present." And if you think about it, being present is really difficult, right? To be in a complete state of surrender where you're not constantly have thoughts going through, because if you're thinking about thoughts, you're not really present, right? If you're trying to formulate words, you're not present. But so here I am, I've been given this this dude gave me a piece of truth, and I'm like, the only thing that matters is to be present. I even have a book called Be Present or Be Here Now, and the whole book is about learning to be present. It's about Ram Dass and his whole transcendence. And I'm still not close to being present, So again, that whole idea of we can't actually perceive logic, or no, we can't perceive what truth is. And so therefore we don't know any truths, or we can't even if we saw a truth, we wouldn't know it. And that's just outside of our understanding. And, again, that just makes a lot of sense, especially when you come to these different paradoxes. And when you live through life, you realize everything's a paradox. Everything is. And yeah, if you try to solve them, you'll just drive yourself crazy. And so the point is not to solve it, it's just to, you know, go back and forth and try to find the middle path. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, subscribe, follow for more. We appreciate you guys.